Okay, fine.
Sumanto.
Then after Pritam, I would request Professor Nasreen to speak, and from there I will request Srirada, and then Professor Rahman, and then Mrs. Debna. So I propose this order.
Okay, hopefully I'll be in office by that time. Okay.
হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ
আচ্ছা, অসুবিধা নেই।
আপনি এখন কোথায়?
আমি এখন আর কি একটা মিটিং ছিল আমার হোটেল সোনারগাঁতে, আমি গাড়িতে উঠলাম।
আচ্ছা, সেখান থেকে অফিস যেতে
হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ
বেশিক্ষণ তো সময় লাগবে না।
ভাই, ঢাকা ট্রাফিকের উপরে দেখি আমার থেকে আপনার বেশি
আজকে থার্সডে, আজকে তো
বিপুলের
থার্সডে,
বেশি আস্থা আছে। হ্যাঁ, থার্সডে, তাই না?
Okay, it's just about 3 o'clock. So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of CUTS International and our partner Unnan Samanay, let me welcome all of you to this webinar on border huts. This is a project which we are implementing in India and in Bangladesh, support of the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Organization of the United Kingdom. This is a project for about 2 years, and we have come to the last phase, last 6 months of this project, and hopefully we're going to continue working on this subject in future as well. So as part of this project, we have done a lot of field work, a lot of ground level research. But other than that, we have also engaged a number of experts to write briefing papers or discussion papers and other knowledge products, which will take forward this initiative in a sustainable manner. That is the idea. So one of our experts, Dr. Pritam Banerjee, he's a logistic expert. He is associated with a number of organizations, including the Asian Development Bank, and a long-term friend of CUTS. So we requested him to write a discussion paper, not just on border huts, but taking that experience as an example to see how we can expand that. So border huts, as we understand from our field work, they are working quite well on the ground. People are happy. There is local area development. Most importantly, in my opinion, it is a very positive initiative for women's economic empowerment. So with that as a background, Pritam has looked into how we can upscale it to border trade zones or retail zones. So he has taken a number of examples from various other parts of the world and also juxtaposed them in a couple of regions in the India-Bangladesh border where he thinks that it is possible to expand this scope of this initiative and to expand it in a manner that they become more of a retail zone, which is going to generate local employment, local economic development, etc. Now, coincidentally, today's webinar has come on a day, I would say, which coincides with a program which is going on right now in the extreme western part of India, in Kutch, in Gujarat. And that is called Simanto Kshetro Vikas Utsav. Simanto Kshetro Vikas Utsav. Where our Honorable Home Minister, Sri Amit Shahji, he has just delivered a speech. And his speech, the main points, resonate perfectly with the theme of today's webinar. As I said, this is just a coincidence. And I will just make 4 points from his speech. First is that the Prime Minister and the Home Minister is there to visit all border zones, not border areas. And that means the political importance that Government of India is giving in its border zones. Development is going to be the focus on border areas, districts, and villages. So it has to be development oriented, nothing else, not just security, development. There will be enhanced emphasis on border infrastructure. And fourth and final is there is going to be a strong and proactive border security, safety, and development policy. So these are the 4 points which I would say. I was just looking at his tweet, that not just resonates but perfectly fit with the idea which Pritam is going to present in today's webinar. So with these few words, let me now request Dr. Pritam Banerjee to make his presentation. Thank you.
As Shumanto is loading the screen, or it's already there. Thank you very much, Shumanto. I would like to first express my gratitude to Team Cuts.
Slightly louder, Pritam, slightly louder.
Right. Uh, Before I begin, I would like to express my gratitude to Team Cuts and specifically to Bipula, to Shumanto, to Arnav, and Uday for involving me in this project and encouraging me to write this paper. So thank you very much again. So Shumanto, if we can move to the first slide. Very briefly, what this slide is trying to give a flavor of is something I think all of us know, that borders are an institutional innovation. They are not a natural thing. It's a human intervention in geography. And they need a set of institutions of their own to be managed and enforced. So customs, immigration, security forces, etc. And like any institutional entity, the quality can differ. So you have different types of borders. The quality of borders and border management differ from place to place and between country to country. The other critical idea that we need to consider is that economic clusters of most economies tend to be deeper into the hinterland, and the corridors that connect two countries, even land corridors, tend to connect these industrial clusters. And what that leads to is typically called the major gateway effect and the circuity effect in literature. The major gateway effect basically means that there are some very critical border points. One could, for example, take the Benapole Petra Pole in the Bangladesh case, through which most of the trade and economic engagement takes place. There might be other border crossing points, but they tend to be minor. So what happens is any development that takes place happens around those critical border points, and rest of it remains much less developed in relative terms. What the circuity effect essentially says is that if there is this major gateway effect, in that case, what typically happens is the natural hinterland of a border area actually might lie across the international border. But because the border exists, that integration cannot take place. So a specific area within a country is deprived of its natural hinterland precisely because the international border exists, and therefore it remains underdeveloped. Now, there are what we call primary and secondary effects of borders in literature. Primary effects is something we all know about. It's about the effect a border has on economic integration between two countries at the macro level, the trade policy and the trade facilitation impacts of it. Secondary effects focus on the local impact of the border. So on the border zone itself, what impact does the border have on the border zone? I don't go deep into that literature, but I'll simply like to discuss here for the purpose of this presentation are the 4 critical drivers of secondary effects, which essentially describe to what extent economic opportunities for cross-border, especially cross-border retail kind of relationships exist. The first one, of course, the obvious one is the cross-border market size, right? So how many people live in the border zones, what is the purchasing power, etc. The second point is the extent of what we call permeability, which essentially means how easy it is for goods and people to cross that border, whether it's officially through legal channels, semi-legal, or even illegal channels. So, how hard is the border or how soft is that border? The third point is what we call differential pressure. And differential pressure typically is a factor of either income. So a certain, one side of the border might have per capita income more than the other, which will mean that it tends to purchase certain varieties of goods not available in the other side. In the economies of scale for those types of goods is easier to achieve in one side of the border vis-a-vis the other. The other is the policy driven stuff. So for example, prices, which are often a function of things like tax, subsidy, the landed cost of a product in a particular area. So the price differential for a certain product might drive consumers to prefer to purchase something from across the border because it's cheaper or easy to avail at the other side. The last point is transfer cost. And this is specifically the official cost of moving goods across the border. So, it's the official channel of the goods movement and to what extent it drives, how expensive or how, less expensive it is. Shumanto, next one, please. Thank you so much. Shumanto, next slide, please.
Yes, I'm trying to do this.
Right. Thank you, Shumanto. So, it's a very busy slide. I will not, the details of it. Essentially, what it does is it looks at the four drivers of the secondary effect I just discussed. So, on the, top left-hand quadrant is a situation where you have, very low levels of permeability combined with high cross-border market size and high differential pressure. So there's a huge amount of incentive for people to shop across borders, but the border is, the permeability is very low and the transfer costs are high, which means typically what would happen is that it's a very, hard border because it's not very permeable. Transfer costs are very high, so formal trade is very difficult to do. But a huge demand exists for cross-border purchases because there's a large market on both sides and there's a differential pressure in terms of pricing differences, etc. So in such a situation, obviously you would want to have a solution for a formal trade zone because there is the opportunity for trade which is not taking place. On the upper right-hand, quadrant, what you have is a situation where that is the border is now very permeable. Everything else remains the same. What that means is a lot of informal trade now takes place. The border is not, a hard border. So while there's a huge amount of demand that exists and official transfer costs being very high, there is a huge incentive to indulge, of course, in smuggling and illegal channels of trade. Even in such a situation, there is a huge incentive or a huge need to have a formal channel of trade set up, which will replace what is happening illegally, bring it into a more formal structure. I will not take time for the bottom two quadrants because they are not much of much interest to our present case. We can more or less, based on our experience, say that the India-Bangladesh border represents my top right-hand quadrant, where border is more or less permeable. A lot of informal trade does takes place and there's a lot of demand on both sides as well, and therefore there is a need to shift to a more formal mechanism that would really help. And I think to an extent, border Haats were made for that purpose. What we are going to argue subsequently now in this presentation is that there is perhaps a need to upscale or look at an alternative model to build on the border Haats on itself. So on to the next one, please. Thank you. So before I kind of go into the two proposed models that I have, I would like to basically give you the flavor of, there are several models, but two which are substantially different from each other to consider. The first one is the US-Mexican border. To an extent, it mimics the India-Bangladesh situation in the sense that a lot of the border have densely populated, not all of the border, but significant portions of the border have densely populated urban zones on both sides. The movement of people is not so comparable to our situation here. in the US-Mexican border, the US side, the American citizens have visa-free entry. The people who live in the border zones of Mexico, Mexican citizens, have a facilitated entry into US for a temporary amount of time. So there is some amount of facilitation for the movement of people. Movement of goods is there for personal consumption. They have tax and customs discounts, so there is facilitation on that aspect. What is more interesting is that both sides have realized that this cross-border movement of people and the ability of the people to consume goods and services in each other's territory is very good for their local business. And therefore, businesses have built these institutions of cooperation. So you have US Mexican local business associations which have developed over a period of time that actively work with local governments and their central governments to keep the facilitation levels high, to help them regulate and manage these borders. And there are some very innovative models for business development. One specific example is the Tijuana corridor, which is very relevant because we are in this paper here, we actually borrow some of the ideas from that. So the Tijuana corridor essentially is something between Tijuana, a city in
August.
and across the border, there's a city called San Jose in California. Many of you probably know the place. Now, what it does is it has a managed walkway, which allows people from Mexican side to cross over to the American side and vice versa. And the walkway leads straight up to the San Jose airport. So it allows Mexican citizens to come into American territory straight to an airport, do their immigration, etc., and then take flights either to international destinations or to other cities in the US itself. And of course, the San Jose airport has a very well-developed retail zone which can be availed. And of course, American citizens can, somebody who wants to go to that part of Mexico can fly into San Jose and then cross over through the walkway and then simply take a bus or whatever onward into Mexico. So it works both ways. So it's a very interesting business model. One specific point I would like to make here is also, it's just not about the goods, it's also the services that are consumed. Because of differential pressure, as we have chosen to describe it, these price differentials and tax-related discounts that you get, which are different in both sides, many services tend to be cheaper on one side of the border than the other. And if it's easy to cross over, consumers often come to the other territory to avail. So even something as simple as getting a blood test done or getting a haircut, many Americans prefer to cross into Mexico and get it done. There are some of the other services which are more easily available in the US. The Mexicans cross over and then they avail of it in the American territory. So, and this has been going on for some decades. So it's quite a well-developed ecosystem. The contrasting example is in the China-Kazakh border. It's called the ICBC. This was specifically set up by the Chinese government. And the idea was to create a mall retail-like experience in the border, which a lot of Kazakh citizens will probably not get in their own country. Obviously, this zone is in a very sparsely populated area, so it's unlike in our borders, which typically tend to have dense population on both sides. Consumers from Kazakh side often come 300, 400 kilometers by bus to this area. It's access controlled for goods and people, which means you have customs and security forces managing entry, exit of both people and goods. Like in the US example, there's a lot of discounts on customs, etc., for tax for personal consumption. And people can come, buy, shop, and go back. So it provides a legal channel for what was otherwise happening illegally. So a lot of consumer goods from China was illegally being smuggled into Kazakhstan by people. Now, with the help of this China-Kazakh border ICBC, it's now more or less, a lot of it is legalized. But again, this is in some ways, because the Kazakh economy does not have much to really offer in terms of goods, consumer goods specifically for the Chinese buyers, it has tended to be a one-sided solution. It's not like the ICBC only allows Chinese retailers. There is, it's also open to Kazakh retailers to come and sell to Chinese citizens. But there are not that many products Kazakhstan produces that is of interest to the Chinese market. So it has tended to be more lopsided. But again, the model itself is a very workable model.
Slightly faster, please.
All right. So how longer do I have?
Another 6-7 minutes.
Okay, right. Now, Shumanta, please next one. So the next. So I'll not take too much time. Basically, this slide tells you that the two areas that I'm considering. One is in Agartala Airport, which I'm proposing as a commercial border zone, and the second one is in Lakhimari Sonahat area, which is south of Kuch Bihar in the West Bengal side, close to Lalmonirhat in the Bangladesh side. These are the two zones, and they have enough market size and purchasing power to justify this kind of an intervention. Next one, please, Shuman. No, the previous one, you skipped one. So essentially, what is unique about the next one, Shuman? What is unique about the Bir Bikram airport in Agartala is that it's right on the border, which it almost touches the border in that sense. And we know there's a huge captive population in that part of Bangladesh, which also travels to India for various reasons, education, health, etc. Now, for them to travel to rest of India, it's very difficult today because they have to go to Dhaka or somewhere else to catch a flight. Now, if this airport was available for them, this would be definitely value addition for our friends in Bangladesh who live in that part of that country. So the proposal is to create something just like we have in the Tijuana corridor in the US, that we use this airport as a solution. I will not get into the diagrammatic overview that we have. It essentially tries to provide details about how you can create a secure zone where people and goods can come in a very secure way, meeting all the, or rather, addressing all the concerns that regulators typically would have, customs, immigration, and security forces. And you can do it in a manner where Bangladeshi citizens can come into this airport, take advantage of this commercial zone, catch a flight and go to wherever they want to go to in India or elsewhere. Similarly, Indian citizens can come into the airport, do their shopping in this zone, and continue with their journey. And retailers from both sides can come in. And besides just the retail activity, what can happen over here is you could have food courts. Again, sellers from both sides can come in. You could have service outlets. So for things like salons or contact centers for education institutions, which are often something which is of interest to many people. You can have medical OPDs, outpatient facilities for people to do tests and radiological stuff. You could have cinema and conferencing facilities. You could have live shows over here. So it's a big mall with multiple things happening, and it's in an airport, and citizens of both sides will have access to it, and sellers and retailers and business people from both sides would have access to it. And the institutional solution that is there detailed in the paper talks about how it will be a joint commercial enterprise between businesses of both sides. So both sides enterprises are benefited by this. It's just not support. While it might be physically located within the airport, which is in India, it effectively is a cross-border zone, which means both sides entrepreneurs benefit. They can sell and do business over here. Next one, please, Shumanta. The same thing is suggested in Lakhimari Sonarhat. The only difference is that we are suggesting this is not an airport. It's just a border area where there's, I think, tremendous untapped demand. Again, the zone is just not for retail. There is an open, as suggested, we have an open air theater and also a wholesale market, because in this area, a wholesale market would make sense. Wholesale markets in some parts of East Asia are called box markets, where you bring in the container doubles up as your storage space in your store. You sell out of it. Again, all the diagrammatic representations here and the explanation I provided in the paper establish the fact that all of this can be done without compromising any of the customs concerns, immigration concerns, or security force concerns. So this can happen in a very a transparent manner. You can have a common bonded warehouse where the customs of both countries can work together. Models across the world exist for such facilities, so it's not something that I have just pulled up from my own head. It's actually working principle in many other parts of the world. And again, over here, you could have theaters and entertainment zones. There's actually a lot of demand of this. People actually come to this border point to hear people perform from the other side. There are YouTube videos actually about this thing happening in this border. So you could actually make it a formal, more nicer environment for these kind of activities. One key point over here that I would like to mention is that, okay, I'll come to that later when I conclude. Next one, please. Next slide. So what are the main doables, which is the basic roadmap? And these are very overview kind of points, which we can, the paper discusses in more detail. And essentially it takes the border hat as a reference point, right? So the border hat has many restrictions right now. It talks about doing away with many of those restrictions. So removal of restriction on who can, who can't shop at these zones, removal of the restrictions and eligibility of who can set up.
Sunday morning.
Pardon me. Yeah, so who can set up these kind of services and stalls. So, basically it allows entrepreneurs and shoppers from both countries to come without any restrictions. A special pass, preferably a biometric one, would secure access for all those people who will be serving and working in these zones. So that will ensure security. You could have a highly targeted risk management system, which we already have in international airports. When consumers, when people buy from duty-free zones, there is very little, the percentage of people who are stopped to be checked and inspected are very few. It's less than 2 to 3%. So again, you could have risk management system which ensures that initially maybe 5% of the shoppers are actually physically stopped and some kind of check done on them, but over a period of time to come down to 2%, so it'll become highly facilitated movement of people and the goods that they're carrying with them. The bonded facility that has been suggested for Lakimari Sonahat to facilitate the more large volume, trade in for box markets where you have wholesale trade. It needs to be, the cost for the bonded warehouse needs to be low, so you could have, you could dispense with the requirements for bank guarantee bond, etc., which typically exist for these facilities to manage the costs. And the initial development for these projects cannot be market driven. Whether it's the Agartala idea or the one over here in Lakimari Sonarat, the land acquisition initial development, there has to be substantial amount of government support. And these facilities will have to be built and rented out at competitive rates, but they over time will become very, very business feasible and will drive a lot of development. So since there are developmental interventions, perhaps even multilateral agencies like World Bank, ADB, AIIB could be roped in for support to develop them. I will stop here. That's all I have. There are other details. So I'm willing to clarify and take questions. Thank you. Did I meet your deadline, people?
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you, Pritam. I would urge all of you to read his paper. I mean, this is a very interesting paper. Of course, he has floated this idea, which is new to our region. Now, some pessimists will always say that, no, this is not going to happen. I mean, straightforward, no, doctor, no, kind of approach. But we'll make sure that this is going to happen. And over time, it develops. So that is our commitment to this kind of work. Of course, as Pritam rightly pointed out, that it can't be market driven from the very beginning. We need to have a lot of investment and public sector participation, including public-private partnership, to make this happen. I'll come to Pritam later with a couple of points or questions. I mean, he has identified these two locations. I think we also need to identify a few other locations on along the West Bengal border, particularly on the southern side of West Bengal. So I'll come to that point later. But let me first come to Professor Nasreen to hear her thoughts on this concept, number one. And number two, how she thinks that this is going to help people at the local level, at the grassroots, and how this kind of an initiative can lead us through women's economic empowerment in particular. So over to Professor Nasreen in about 8 to 10 minutes.
Thank you, Bipul Chatterjee. And I have been listening to Pritam's presentation, and we just received just immediate before the paper, and I think the presentation made it more clear that he wanted to share with us. And it's always good that the border hat or the cross-border commerce helping us, since that we are part of globalization process. And this is also a very, I think it's like giving our international expenses more, because he is proposing some more like air route based businesses also. Another hat he just like Mari hat and Shuna hat, that cross-border businesses. So that that is it's very true that it would bring like if we expand anything, that means it will bring the revenue, it will increase the revenue, and also it will help us to like maximizing the product selling, and also involving many people. So the point would be that if we look at the like, because I have been involved with the border hat and specifically written paper on the gender responsive issues and women empowerment. So I would be focusing more on, if we say people, that how the people would be benefiting from this. So we think of in the gendered culture and gendered economics, we have to think of both women and men. Specifically, from my point of view, you'd like to go back to the historical process of the initiation of this border hat. That one would be my one point, and another would be that how we are thinking of post-COVID-19 situation. So in that context, what we say that how we are going to be benefited when we are identifying the trade rules and other like non-trade policies, and when we are identifying the commodities which would be, or the items that we would like to bring into the market. So if we look at that the initial start of this border hat started with involvement of both women and men. If you can see the flyer, everywhere you are portraying the women, but also men, but they are not that much like, you should not say that they are economically very much strength. And how do we need to strengthen this entrepreneurship? So specifically, if we say that we don't have data before we start or launching any other, so I think the cards or organizers or Pritam would suggest for an exploratory study, because if we do not have database, who would be benefiting and who would be not benefiting, so we need to have some consultative dialogues also, that who would be associated with this business, what are the groups that would be part of this border hat, who can fly and who can come and who can purchase, who can have access to those theater that you are proposing, and who won't. If some categories of people are excluded, how we are planning to include them. So in the border hat, the very notion of the concept that we wanted to have inclusive society. And I think the whole South Asian regions, India is sharing with so many borders with different countries, Bangladesh also sharing borders, and there are also some issues that all borders cannot be open for with the neighboring countries. That's the true, and that's the reality. So what are the discriminations, I should say, before we plan? What are the challenges that we will face if we propose for any expansion of our any this kind of border hat? So that's why we should focusing on the inclusive or intersectionality based economic development, and which development will not leave anyone behind. We have to, at the same time, we have to look at our country or region specific economic growth or the poverty reduction issues. So that that's my main point, that we do not want that inequality rise. So as a result of any other, like some categories of people are always lagging behind. So then we are measuring our my policy paper that I shared earlier, and that we have to look at the indicators which are making people empowered, specifically women, specifically persons with disabilities who can also have access to business, economic, educational, political, all other issues. So that's the major indicators we have to focus. We have to focus who are most like more mobile than others, whose mobilities are restricted not to have access to these markets. What are the gendered culture and economy in this open market and the vending system? What are the type of products that we are selling? How we are bringing these, the transportation system, is this affecting to all, or is this equal for all? And is there any wage discrimination? Is there any like discrimination between the prices? And is there any win-win situation that we always refer to? So that's why we know that border hat is increasing income opportunities for all, but maybe not for all if we, when we are doing some new without having any people's perception. And also there are some security issues, because you have discussed, Pritam mentioned about the aircraft based and new border hat based. So if we would like to have security, like ensure security, that whom we ensure security, we have to ensure security in domestic and as well as in the bordering areas. So those issues are to be our, I think it would be not our liability. So if we would like to give autonomy to the and freedom to all the people, then we have to look at their workplace, their security, their satisfaction, and also that how they are going to uh, running the business. And another issue is important, like when we say aircraft base, and also we say about physically doing this market. What do we think about post pandemic? Because many countries have already stepping towards e-commerce in the border hats. So we can have another planning, and I think cards could invite our border hat initiative, can dedicate exploratory study on that how to increase that e-commerce base. Then there will be a question of capacity build enhancement, not building but enhancement, because in our study that women engagement in border hat and vendors, and also the well-being related issues, we have seen all of them are not having equal access or equal opportunities, not having equal locality, not coming, and even the product we are bringing from somewhere and we are selling. So I would suggest invite the community or the products from the local community, which they can produce with their indigenous knowledge, with their practices, which are always in the verge of extinctions. How could we bring those back? So I think my 7-8 minutes over, people. This is
Thank you.
just some scattered thoughts and ideas.
Thank you.
Thank you
For your thoughts. Certainly not scattered. So definitely, I mean, one very important point which you have made is that we should do a feasibility study, detailed feasibility study involving stakeholders, multi-stakeholder
Yes.
approach. So that's definitely what we are going to do going forward. Let me now come to Sridhara for to hear her thoughts. Then I'll come to Mrs. Debnath, then Professor Rahman. So Mustafiz bhai, I guess you are in office now, right? Yeah. So
Yes.
okay.
Yes.
So first Sridhara, then Mrs. Debnath, and then Professor Rahman. Mustafiz bhai, sorry about this. Gents last. Okay. Sridhara.
Okay, thank you, Vipul. Thank you, Kutz, for having me here. I enjoyed reading Pritam's paper, and of course, your presentation, but I read the paper with great interest. And I just want to say that I've actually spent few days at Tijuana as well as the El Paso, Mexico border. And I've seen how brilliantly they've been able to manage the borders in terms of e-commerce, security issues, how you have these passes on which are stamped on your car. You can just drive through, how people have been identified in terms of border ID cards. So, that kind of course, and I've seen this 10 years ago. I'm sure things have even improved further. So I really enjoyed the fact that how you're trying to see this can be translated into Indian conditions. Let me, in the next few minutes, spread my thoughts. One is on the actual issue that I've seen within the border huts. I'm specifically talking about Balat, where I've spent a couple of days, as well as the other hut in Meghalaya. We just heard from Professor Nasreen about gender sensitivity, but here in the border huts, what I realized is, we first need to sensitize our security, personnel. The people are actually, there are these traders are actually allowed in groups. All of them are not allowed in together because the space is an issue, and so they have to be kind of restricted, and but you actually have a physical barbed wire which holds them together to kind of outside the actual zone when you enter the heart, which I think is unthinkable in today's time. There is no way that you cannot, a simple bamboo division on the pathway can actually have proper corridors for people to wait in a dignified manner. But here you actually have security personnel holding barbed wires on two sides and edging of the traders as well as sellers and buyers, which I think is completely no. And I don't know why. And I did try and talk to the officials there, but they seem pretty lost to the idea as to what am I talking about. The other point again was that there was absolutely, and the entire heart on both the huts, Balat and the other one, had a lot of women buyers and sellers there. In fact, most of the agro products and other things were actually women, stakeholders were there. But there was absolutely no facilities, no provision, nothing for them. All the border huts have a security proper structure, which is actually meant for the officials, and there is restroom and water services for them, but nothing. And I specifically asked in both these points that what is the because they spend few hours there, so you must have some kind of a restroom, some kind of and there are lots of women sitting there. I didn't notice any children, but I'm sure over the corner I was just there, as I said, a day again on one couple of days, but it's not necessary that there may be some women coming in with their children too. So I think we have to be sensitive to these issues, because most of the borders that I've been to, even one in Bengal, that has a lot of women on the heart sitting there themselves. So how are we not sensitive to this? I don't know. The security personnel is extremely insensitive. That is true for all of India. But I'm saying in border huts, when there's a direct interaction, hour to hour, minute to minute, we have to sensitize them far more. Also, in terms of, there are many issues as to traders much beyond that 5 kilometers are actually, putting out their goods there and those kind of things. Those can be handled. But I'm saying, the way in, between More, Tamu, we know there's 16 kilometers, on both sides we can travel. This is India, Myanmar border I'm talking about. Here also, if we could actually do ID cards for people, if we could extend that area, and I know there's a thought in India, and I think people started with that, about the Home Minister trying to do many more such, open up such more places for easier commerce and everything. But I think actually on the ground, while these are the population who don't complain because they haven't seen a different world, but I'm saying for people who actually can help them, we need to address the small issues on the ground itself, from available drinking water to other facilities, which is basic human needs. Those are not addressed in most of the border huts that I've been to. While there are many other issues in terms of how I've seen, and I've mentioned this earlier also, that third world, other country, not only Bangladesh, India goods, but it was full of ceramic, which was from China. Very clearly, there were a lot of other stuff which was plastic goods on the heart, which was again all Chinese made. But those are, again, we can say that the quantum wasn't so much, but I think there has to be some way we can actually streamline that. And I think both the countries, and especially now both the countries, there's no way that we should not be able to address this idea. But on the larger context of what Pritam talked about, and I think that's something, again, Bipul is aware of the work that I'm doing on the borders, but I'm talking about a community development. while also, and I've also seen that border at Tripura. In fact, Ms. Devnath is also here. You know how people actually cross over to come to a big bazaar and buy packet full of things and go every day. And I've stood there and seeing it for many hours. There is no reason why people should not be able to do that. And I think we should be able to encourage things like, you know, whether it's Big Bazaar or Reliance stores or whatever it is, whatever facilities available on each side, why should population not have equal access? Here, I mean, people are buying, but the security personnel told us that we are turning a blind eye. Why do you want to turn a blind eye? See it. You know, there has to be a functional way that you can handle this. I mean, you're not doing anybody a favor by turning a blind eye. Look at it and see, you give us a resolution as to how we can deal with it. If for them buying cream and oil and, you know, whatever they're doing, because Big Bazaar has legit products, it's not the illicit stuff are being sold. So why will people not have access to it on a daily basis? And also, I mean, coming back to the borderland, and we know that very well, and I'm talking about borderland myself because I know that more closely. I haven't seen it from the Bangladeshi side. Their access to amenities is very low. So if we are actually able to, again, taking off from where Pritam was saying, we are able to, you know, put these kind of supply zones where there is a need for these things to be brought in. And again, I mean, I'm not going to take too much of details, but, you know, I have this whole concept of using the border hut facility, which is basically just a building that I need. If you could start community development in terms of how, you know, I've realized borderland population on both sides, whether on Bangladesh or the Myanmar side, they have zero access to healthcare. They have zero access to education. And those are the common human needs, I think, on both sides, given the fact they're friendly neighbors that we are discussing. Why are we not able to? We know from Myanmar, the maximum work that, I mean, people to come in to actually access hospitals in Manipur. Similarly, here we've seen that. I mean, how these amenities are not available on both sides, and people find a way to go there. So why are we not easing that? Why are we trying to say that these are not in the formal list? We can't do that. But again, the point I think that was made just now, that let's go down to the ground. Let's see that what is an between India and Bangladesh, except for the illicit products, every list is acceptable, every product is acceptable. But why are we not able to set up establishment which is easier? I'm going to close here, Bipul, but I'm saying that I'm not looking at large establishment just now. I'm saying even with this common basic structure that the security establishments had at every border hut, which is available, I've seen that. Even there, you can start a community development program, just involving the, you know, stakeholders on both sides, the similar group, and, you know, also establish ID cards. I think that makes life simple for security and for the entire administration. Just have ID cards issued for, you know, a scale of 5 kilometers, which is officially there, or if you want to expand that. I'll close here. Thanks.
Thank you, Srirada. This is what I like about Srirada most. I mean, she is always on time, and she always put forward a positive, a forward-looking agenda instead of being another Dr. No. So anyway, before I come to Mrs. Devnath, let me underline 2 points. First is that, of course, security is important, but we have to stop looking at everything from the prism of security. This reminds me of a saying which was made by a former Prime Minister of India when she said that poverty is the biggest polluter. Of course it is. But drawing from there, let me say that prosperity is the biggest driver of security. So you have to think about prosperity. You have to stop being apostles of poverty. So there are many apostles of poverty who actually own millions or maybe billions of dollars. I don't want to take any names. But there's poverty is a good market actually, and they want to keep people in the poverty. We don't want to do that. We want people to prosper. We have to have this development oriented politics on the ground for people to prosper. So with that, but there are a number of issues, of course. And then the second point is, for that to happen, it's the state government, provincial governments, subnational governments, they have a major role to play. Of course, there are a number of Dr. No's are also there, but Mrs. Devnath is an exception. She always, again, like Srirada and others, she comes out with a positive, forward-looking agenda. So, Mrs. Devnath, my question or point to you is that, given this concept, of course, we're going to discuss with you in detail, in person. Given this concept, What is the role that you are thinking about state governments to take it forward to Delhi? What is the role of the subnational government to take it forward to Dhaka? So unless Dhaka and Delhi moves, we'll keep doing our papers and webinars. So of course, I'll pose the same question to Professor Rahman, the how to move Dhaka. But Mrs. Debna, since you are from Tripura government, what are your thoughts on how you can take it forward to New Delhi? Over to you in about 8 to 10 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Bipul sir. Thank you, Shumanta, for always associating me in this type of program. They never forget me to involve in this type of programs. And out of this program, I am getting enriched actually, because we are in the policymaker side and not much involved in the field activities and field realities, ground realities. So in participating in these programs, I am just getting the feedback from the actual ground, and these help us in making the policy. So here, thank you, Mr. Pritam. I have gone through your paper, and today also through the presentation, it made me more clear. And I am excited actually. This is a totally new concept to me, at least to the state government here, because the border hut concept was it was also a thrilling experience for us, because I personally was associated with these border huts from the zero date. So starting from the selection of site, going to that site for doing the joint border hut management committee meetings with ADMs from both the countries, I mean from Tripura and from Bangladesh, that counterpart. And it was a really nice experience. And the actual, what I feel the actual aim of the border has that people to people connectivity. Now we are talking about community development and all these things, but the main focus was for connectivity, people to people connectivity. And I think 100% we could achieve that that focus, that target. So both of our two border has, these are very successfully running, and the people are also very happy. In government also we are very happy. Now coming to this new chapter, and this is it is if border hut is a small nut and it is a big shell, this project, this border trade zone, and that is also in a retail manner. So I think it is it would be viable. Why not? Because once the border huts are getting so much response, and this is a broader concept with high sphere of activity, involvement of most stakeholders. And I mean, the SOPs are already there, as Mr. Pritam has explained here. I think there are three things. Most important is the movement of goods, movement of person, and some institutional solution, and overall the ecosystem of some basic services. So these are already in place. One thing is that we have to bring, as madam has told just now, that we need to have some kind of stakeholder sensitization, because for state government also this is a new concept. And for both the countries, I think if it is already, it is as you have told Mr. Pritam, it is already there, and successfully this model is there in some of the part of other countries. So here also we expect from government level also, we expect that it can be made once the feasibility is there. Because see, border huts, these are I mean it is not a profitable manner. It is, there is no commercial value of it. Just it is the development of the economic development of the border within, also that is 5-kilometer radius only you can go there and purchase there. So many restrictions. But for the concept of this border trade zone in a retail manner, I think some relaxation should be there, because as the project here, it is mentioned in the Agartala airport. So again, security aspect, of course, it is already there, but that is also again to be examined with the relevant stakeholders. Then entry of the people from both the side, as it is mentioned, there will be walkthrough for people movement as well as for goods movement. The model is really attractive, and it can be done. We can take it forward. And if CARS is there in between, like a mediator, and if the proposal comes in a formal manner in the state government, that also can be done. And we will also definitely take it up with the government of Bangladesh once it is agreed here in principle. So in that way, we are very much positive with this proposal, and we hope that it can be done. Thank you, Mr. Bipul sir. This is all from my side.
Thank you so much, particularly the final 30 seconds that you are going to take it forward. So it is a cuts initiative. We just don't talk, we do things on the ground. So thank you very much. Of course, we are going to come to you with our proposal. We'll not just help you, but we'll make sure that this is done. With that, let me now come to Professor Rahman, one of my mentors and long-time friend of cuts. There are so many things which you have learned from him, but the most important thing is that if anybody wants to learn what humbleness means, what is the definition or the meaning of humbleness, Professor Mustafizur Rahman. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Bipul. Thank you for this very generous introduction. No, Bipul, really, I don't think that very often we have an opportunity to discuss an issue which is really, new, innovative. But as Voltaire said, nothing is as strong as an idea whose time has come. But the time doesn't come automatically. We have to push it forward. And that's what CARTS is doing. And I'm very happy that the border heart discussion has now, thanks to CARTS and particularly deep appreciation of Pritam's presentation and his work, that we are trying to move it forward. I will, in my next 8 to 10 minutes, I will try to contextualize the discussion. There is a macro part of it, and there is a micro granular part of it. The macro part and the reality is that the border districts and border areas in both our countries are the most underdeveloped areas. If you look at, for example, Bangladesh, the poverty line and the inequality, the spatial dimensions, we see a clear-cut, demarcation that the border areas are underdeveloped. And also, I think that relatively speaking, on the Indian side also, the 5 states of Paschim Bangla, Assam, Mizoram, Meghalaya and Tripura, with which we have the border. And let us remember, this is world's 5th longest land border, this 4,096 kilometers. So Bangladesh may be a small country by geographical size, but it has world's 5th longest land border in the world. So I think, as I said, the spatial dimensions of development will give us that particular perspective that these are relatively underdeveloped, and that's why more economic interaction, and as Ms. Devnath has very rightly also mentioned, the interest of Tripura government, and Professor Nasrin mentioned about revival of local economy, and Dr. Sriradha mentioned about community development. All these are very important when we keep in mind that broader perspective of the border areas. Now, going back to what Pritam has proposed, I think that it's very important that we think about how we could contribute to the development of these areas. Border huts, okay, a good start. But as Ms. Devnath has very rightly mentioned, that its scope and scale, these are very limited. It's perhaps per head $200 as far as I remember, 5 kilometers, a selected number of goods. So how we can scale up? I think that's what Pritam was mentioning, and from cross-border experiences, he gave us very good idea how it could be done. I could see from Pritam's, and I have with great interest, I have read from first page to the last page, that there are several stages that we have to think about. Now, one is the border hut, which is the minimum. Then you can have retail trade zones. Then you have a bit broader commercial border zones, and then you have cross-border special economic zones. So I look at it as stages, and I was going through Pritam's work and trying to read some of the parts multiple times. So Pritam did mention about building blocks. I think that's the way, and so it would have been good if the trajectory that we should take from border hut to cross-border special economic zones, that trajectory is very important. As I said, it should be the stages that I could glean from Pritam's cross-country examples. So border hut, and then we go to the retail trade zones, then we go to the commercial border zones, and then we go for special economic, the cross-border special economic zones, where we not only have people-to-people connectivity, as Sri Radha and Professor Nasrin was mentioning, but also so people-to-people connectivity, and Ms. Devnath also mentioned, and then trade connectivity. Then there has to be some type of transport connectivity. But then if we go for a special economic zone type of development, or commercial border zone type of development, we can also bring in more fundamentally investment connectivity as well. Because if you have to trade, you have to produce, you have to have the supply chain. So as you scale up, you can also bring in investment connectivity in a broader, cross-border economic, special economic zones. The reality is that we had one economy with before the partition, and then Bangladesh's independence in 1971. But many of the economic logics of the earlier years, these are still also there. So how do we take advantage of that? So respect the borders, but take advantage of the economic ties. So that should be, I think, the philosophy which should drive us. Now, in order to do that, and whatever the 4 stages that I have mentioned, we will have to have various things in place. So let us not fool ourselves. We have seen how this can be difficult. We have seen how the border areas are often very difficult areas in terms of security. We have seen, smuggling, informal trade, criminalization of the border areas, border killings, etc., leading to that. So I think that the security coordination, sequencing, and logistics coordination, trade facilitation coordination will be very important. And I think that since we have the digitization of our economies and our NIDs and digital platform, interoperability of the systems, all this could be brought together in order to operationalize those. So one can go into the concrete details, but one thing is also very important, which is that, and people-to-people connectivity has been mentioned by Bipul, by Pritam, and all the 3 distinguished panelists. And I think that this is very important. I read many years back when I was young that if goods don't cross borders, troops will. So peace dividend that this type of coordination can generate is also very important. So I think that we have to keep that also in mind and always take it. So I would like to congratulate Pritam and CARTS and the CARTS is an institution which not only does not only think tank, it is also act tank. And then once it pursues an issue, it wants to take it, to the logical end and to come up with some actionable agendas. So I'm very much hopeful that the work that CARTS has done and Pritam's very good ideas, it will be sequenced well, and the better should not be the enemy of the best. Let us go in a building block manner so that we can gradually go into the cross-border economic zones, which I think is also very important. And some of the panelists have also mentioned that that's where we should, because the cross-border economic zones could be very important in terms of giving us the benefits on a broader scale. And so these zones should not be just selling points, but these should contribute to the economy through employment creation and through investment. So I think that it has a lot of potential. And good luck, Kats. Bipul, thank you very much for all the good works, and Pritam, excellent work. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Again, I would like to say 2 or 3 points before I open the floor for discussion. First is, it's not just Kats and many other think tanks like Vivekananda International Foundation.
Very good. Your partners as well.
We have to do it together. The most important point, I think, in my opinion, is that instead of doubting Thomases, taken together, we are harbingers of progress. And that is the spirit on which we are working, we have worked, we are working, and we have to work in future. So as usual, Professor Rahman has given us a lot of food for thought, which is good, particularly before Diwali. And therefore, we have to not just ponder over them, we have to also see how we can take them forward. I'm sure that Pritam has also made a note of them. We have made a note of them, and we need to first imbibe and then prioritize, strategize to how to take them forward. The only thing which I would like to say at this point of time, all of you, particularly Professor Rahman, you have not just talked about the macro aspects, but also very micro aspects of all these thoughts or developments which you can think of. And you have reminded us 2 great economists. One is, of course, Simon Kuznets, about the stages of development. We can go back to our college days and again see how we can juxtapose that conceptual thing into this. And second is, I'm forgetting his full name, is Fantunen, who is famous for his rings of development. It's like a concentric circles, rings, which is a basic reading in our course on transport, location, and infrastructure. So for the time being, for a moment, let's think that Agartala Airport is at the center of that rings of development. And then a number of rings around it. And this is how I think we can ensure, as Professor Rahman has rightly said, peace, stability, security, and prosperity in those regions. So we still have about 20-25 minutes to go. So let me now open the floor. Those whoever want to. There are already a couple of questions which I may request Pritam to first address, which are there in the chat box. Pritam, can you see them? Can you read them? And then if you can respond to some of the major points, not all, of course, some of the major points which have been highlighted by our distinguished panel of discussants.
Yes, thank you so much. I really appreciate the words of encouragement, support. Really means a lot. I will just quickly first address a couple of the key points from the commentators very quickly, and then with your permission, Bipulda, move on to the questions that are already there in the chat box.
Yeah.
So in terms of the inclusiveness, let me make it very clear. It's a very important point. And I completely agree with the comments made. Just a quick clarification, the airport will not only be where the model is delineated in the paper, it will not only be for people who are flying. The market will be on its own a market zone, a retail zone, and anyone can come there. You don't have to be a person taking a flight. You can come from both sides and leave. It's an access controlled installation or infrastructure. If you are taking a flight, it does help. And it's inclusive in the sense that it also allows Indians to travel, tourists who would want to go to that part of Bangladesh, to take a flight into Agartala and then just cross over and go to different parts and vice versa. So it does reduce the cost of travel for many people who actually do travel between these countries for various reasons. The second point on e-commerce, it's a very valid point, I think. And especially with COVID, we have seen how quickly e-commerce has grown. In fact, in the paper, I do mention how these zones can become either a pickup point for e-commerce products ordered from across the border with easy payment mechanism, or in the case of the Lakimari example, the existence of a bonded warehouse allows it to become a distribution point into both countries for e-commerce sellers from both countries. So it actually facilitates the movement of small parcels across borders, which sometimes tend to be complicated, definitely complicated in South Asia. It provides a solution for that as well. And the paper talks about that a bit. So it definitely has the e-commerce aspect included. I think the points about amenities and I think respect for people when we are trying to create these infrastructure for people to people connect are very well made. And I find it, and I think the Sridharaji's point is not just unique to our borders. If we travel across South Asia, whichever country you are in, we tend to
Thank you, sir.
this kind of lack of access to amenities, especially for women, which brings in the gender aspect into it as well. That needs to come in, and I think to that extent, the modernization and scaling up of these facilities helps. I'm not saying it is the only answer. There are a lot more cultural and socio-economic factors that needs to go into it. Just the sensitization. I think Sridharaji will agree that the police or security forces in our region tend to react to how they would behave with you depends on who you are. And who you are, unfortunately, in our part of the world, sometimes is a visible factor in the kind of language you speak, the kind of clothes you wear, etc. And that differential is immediately made. Nobody would behave with Sridharaji or me in the fashion that they're behaving with the local people. So to that extent, when you create these kind of modern infrastructures and you drive this, it drives some element of that inclusiveness already. I think very well made points. The other ones, I think I've taken them note of them and I'll include them. Quickly moving on to the questions in the chat box. First question is, are human communities same on either side of the border? I would assume you mean, are there socio-cultural affinities? Absolutely, on both sides of the border. The border in some ways, especially in this Indo-Bangladesh context, was always a human border. It was a man-made imposition on what has been a contiguous cultural, socio-economic space for centuries. So whether we are talking about the Tripura West Bengal border or the borders on the West Bengal side, it's always been like that. The idea about having a facilitation center with both officials of both countries working together is exactly what we have suggested in the paper, that we have they work under same roof. Facilities like what we have described in the paper cannot work otherwise. I just scrolling down. I think there's a very good suggestion about floating hearts on the rivers. That is, there's a comment. I think it's a very innovative idea. It's something we could look at. You can marry that with cruise tourism and other aspects. It could something that definitely could happen with the inland water transport and the protocol route becoming more effective in this region. It's something we could definitely look at. Even look at, if you have cruise tourism in these rivers, could even look at cruise terminals doubling up as retail centers where local artisans can come and sell for the more well-heeled consumers who avail of these cruises. That's definitely something that could be looked at.
We have, just to add, sorry Pritam, just to add on this point, we have already identified two locations. One is on Brahmaputra, the other is on Barak River.
fantastic. So, Kutch as always is ahead of the curve. Uh, I think there's another point about skepticism, and sensitization. I think that is a very well made point, and that is, I think, sensitization across several planes. One is on the official plane on both sides of the border, but also people and local communities and local leadership in these states need to understand the benefits, economic and otherwise. Uh, I think those are more or less.
No, there is one on this informal trade and border heart and security and aspects of border hearts.
I'm just trying to see if I've scrolled too fast. Can be complementary to informal trade and facilitate security aspects. Yes, I think that is from Madhusudan Sharma. I think that's a very good point. Yes, absolutely. I think one of the main driving factors behind border hearts, not even the more advanced concept, but the border hearts itself was that it replaces what anyway happens informally. But when it happens informally, it does two things. It increases the cost that the consumer gets the products by. There's a level of arbitrariness that comes in. Supplies are not regular. And more importantly, there's a criminal element that potentially can come in. Doesn't always come in, but potentially can come in, which is always risky for the security aspect of things. So absolutely well made point. I think any kind of such cross-border infrastructure, whether it's a small border hut or a larger installation like an economic zone, all of them serve this same purpose, that it formalizes what otherwise would anyway happen in a highly permeable border like the Indo-Bangladesh one. Before I end, I'll just like to thank Professor Rahman. I think his idea about this stage-wise development is very well made. You cannot jump through the hoops. You have to, and I think it goes back to Bipulda's point and the point others made about the feasibility. I think when you get into the feasibility aspect and do the study, it will inform you exactly to what stage and at what level you can start the development and how fast you can scale it up. Thank you. I'll stop there.
Thank you. Now, there is another point made by Mr. Ratul Borua, who is a journalist from Assam, about this. Let me take that point, that there is still some skepticism in Meghalaya in particular about border hearts, or about border in particular, the security aspects of border. And I think he has rightly pointed out that there is a need for more and more sensitization. And I think local media, we have to engage more and more with local media and local government in places like in panchayats, the tribal institutions, to sensitize people that look, border are not bad places, and we can make them safer, we can make them prosperous, and things like that. Now, yes, Pritam.
Just 5 seconds, Vipul. I think it's very important for us to categorize what's the nature of concern, or I'll not use the word fear. It's a very strong word. What is the nature of concern that is driving the local communities to be skeptical? I think we can say there are three typical concerns. The first one is economic, where you feel that an open border will have impact on my livelihood in terms of goods coming in, or people coming and setting up businesses which will have a competitive effect for me. The second typical concern is about illegal migration, people coming in and land takeover, etc. That's a typical second type of concern. The third concern is that typically is related to general security, that there's going to be some element of criminality, etc. Commercial activities will give rise to perhaps less safer neighborhoods, ecosystems. We need to understand, and I think if we go across this huge border, which Professor Rahman correctly pointed out is one of the largest land borders in the world, as we move from district to district or state to state, we will see the concerns kind of change in nuance. And it's important to understand the local nuance of the concern and explain how the systems and institutions you have in place for any of these infrastructure actually addresses that concern. So I just wanted to add that detail.
Thank you. So we still have some time. I mean, this doesn't mean that we have to stretch ourselves to 4:30, but there are a couple of points which I wanted to make. One is that Pritam, you have rightly identified two locations. One is in Tripura with Agartala Airport as a center, One is in Lower Assam, covering Lower Assam, Northern Bengal, Northwestern Bangladesh. So I think we have to, going forward, we have to also think about a location in southern West Bengal. The southern part, the lower part of West Bengal, where we can make this proposal. In this context, there is not just a need, but there is also a demand for this kind of initiatives. I'll just give you a couple of examples where we are recently successful. We have successfully convinced the World Bank Group to consider doing a feasibility study for a multimodal logistic park in Triveni Balagar area over the Hooghly River and adjoining areas. It's excellently well connected by road, by railway, and by waterway. Second is a Ro-Ro service over the Ichamati River in Taki, in North 24 Pargana, and on the other side, Satkhira in Bangladesh. So these two are already in the process. The initial discussion is going to take place. We're going to propose another multimodal logistic park in Kolaghat, covering that part of West Bengal and also adjoining areas. Now we have to think about this development model in a very holistic concept, keeping Bangladesh at the center of this model. Then on one side we have Northeast, on one side we have Southeast Asia, Northeast India, Southeast Asia, and then East India, from North Bengal to Bihar, Jharkhand, other parts of West Bengal, including Odisha. And we have to look at it in an overall connectivity framework, so that, and also link it with other initiatives. For example, this special economic zone initiative in Bangladesh. That's a very important point which Professor Rahman has also made. Investment opportunities, bilateral value chains, and things like that. So definitely we are going to take forward this initiative. So there is a very strong, I think, economic case for it. More importantly, there's a very strong political economic case for it. So we have to put that in such a framework. So with that, there are a couple of other points. If Pritam, would you like to look at them? They are in the chat box.
Yes, please. There's one from Mr. Manoj Kumar Roy. He talks about products of demand on both sides of the border. And he talks about the fact that indigenous products from both sides must have, there should be products to offer for both sides. I think that's a very well-made point. But I would like to submit to Mr. Roy this fact that in many cases, in large parts of the world, retail trade is not driven. While it's important to think about the local products, retail trade is not often driven by local products themselves. It's the value addition that retail provides, also provides livelihoods. So if and it depends where I draw the border. If I stay in Gurgaon, if my border is, if Gurgaon was a city state, it does not produce anything, but it has a very vibrant retail economy where everything from outside Gurgaon comes, and those who participate in the retail business are actually a thriving enterprise for them. It provides employment, it provides revenue, all of that. So while it's important to keep that thing in mind, it's also important that retail is basically based on arbitrage, on price differentials, which drive a very vibrant entrepreneur economy. Singapore or Dubai are case to the point of cities which don't produce anything. They're extreme examples, but they're good examples to look at. So as also was pointed out by Sridhar ji, when you go to many of, and I have also gone to a couple, border haats, you will see that people are often selling things which are not of local provenance. They are selling things made in China, Thailand. I have seen people selling things that are actually made in Vietnam, textile products. So
I think it's very much okay. But the thing is that actually, you actually cited that in China-Kazakh border area, that actually Kazakhs has not so many products to offer for the Chinese. Actually, that can create a difference. And also, the very objective of the border huts was that the local peoples also actually have their opportunities. Only actually taking products from other areas. But I think it will be a very good idea if there are so many indigenous products that earlier, before the artificial border was created, that move freely, the factors, people, even the capital. But now, if we can actually create some skills to produce their own products, that will have demand in the both sides of the product border.
Yeah.
That will give, I think, some impetus to the interest of the local people for the border huts. Nothing only that selling and buying goods. This will actually create much more employment. And that's why actually I'm suggesting that whether we can have an actually study that what are the new, what are the demands of the earlier products of indigenous nature, and also the new demand generated as the actual income of the local people has increased. So there are generated demands of new products. So if we can actually make scope to produce these products locally, that will give much more in, apart from business, that will give some employment scope. And what you are saying actually that the special economic zones, etc., like this will be the mini actually maybe the export processing zones, etc. That's my idea, that I want to focus on the very objective on which the actually border hut was started. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Manoj. Very good point. Of course, we need to link it with skill development, development and encouragement of local products, vocal for local. We have to look at it that way.
Indigenous products.
Before I come to my colleague Arnab, I'm very pleased to see that Dr. Kamala Gurung from ICMO, International Center for Integrated Mountain Development, which is an intergovernmental body based in Kathmandu. And in fact, we are partnering with ICMO in implementing another very interesting project, which is on the involvement of women in cross-border trade in various locations of Himalayas region, in various landscapes of the Himalayas. Dr. Gurung, would you like to give your feedback about, I mean, very general feedback, I mean, after hearing all this?
Thank you, Vipulji. Wonderful. It's very eye-opening. It's my first time that I actually formally attending trade-related, the conference or workshop, and I learned a lot. I really appreciate Pritamji's overview of the trade. One thing I would, and then definitely Professor, I forgot her name, it's not showing, and then a few other issues came up, security, which is really eye-opening to provide the sensitivity of kind of training. But one thing it would be good to classify, I know the earlier colleagues already mentioned that I really wanted to know about the the more informal and formal trade. That could be better. I think that is what I have been taught in a way. And definitely I work in Bangladesh, and it's in my heart. I spent 5 years working at Erie, and I have been across the southern part of the Bangladesh, South Kira side, and I'm really happy to see this trade border, cross-border trade is going to happen, and I'm so pleased to hear. And I'm really, continue to learn from all these experts upcoming days. And thank you very much, Vipulji. Back to you.
Thank you, Kamalaji. I mean, definitely we have looked at this aspect, informal trade, and how border huts are helping reduction of informal trade, what are the welfare implications and things, both for consumer welfare as well as producer welfare. Couple of years back, we did a study on this, again in partnership with World Bank. So I would request my colleague Sumanto to send you a copy of the study and also the draft report which we have produced as part of this project. So
Thank you.
that is still in a draft form, and there is a full chapter with data, everything on informal trade and how border huts have helped reduce informal trade and enhance security in those areas. So I think my colleague Arnav Ganguly, he raised his hand.
Can I do things?
Thank you, Kamalaji.
Can I add two
Yes,
points?
please.
Um,
Yes, please.
To highlight that COTS and Ishimote is partnering, and then we are working currently doing a assessment study, looking at the more on the trade and women specifically in 10 countries in the border side. And this is now ongoing study between the Ishimote and then with COT International one part. The other part is, for me, it's a very opening in a way that Hat Bazaar, the weekly market, and that actually helped me to reestablish, to look into more on the market perspective, particularly informal sector. Did Hat Bazaar, the weekly Hat Bazaar, perhaps will help between the cross-border, also within the community, particularly giving an emphasis to the women and then marginalized group. I think that that would be a great focus for me. Back to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Arnav. Very quickly. We have just about a minute to go. Oh, we are on time.
Yeah, so I just flag 1 or 2 points. First of all, regarding Mr. Manoj Roy's point on skilling, I mean, for doing that, what we are also trying, we did under this project is we have identified certain trades existing at the grassroots level, and we have already mentioned that those kind of things need to be upscaled through training, etc. For example, the beetle nut case, where maybe the cultivation is done on one side and the processing is done on the other side, and maybe the final product can be traded. So that's one part. The second part is about the important thing is these border locations. What we have found is mostly they are agricultural families. The agriculture is the mainstay, and so looking at industrial products or any manufacturing units is kind of I won't say challenging, but it would require a detailed skill mapping for those locations. So that is something we will be doing also in the coming days. So thanks. I'll stop.
And thank you. Thank you. So if there is no other important point to place on the table, so let me once again thank all of you, our speakers, as well as all other participants for participating in today's webinar, for placing your thoughts. I think this is one of the best which we have in the recent past. I mean, there is so many positive points for taking forward this agenda. So with that, I thank you, and we are going to do a series of, we are already doing a series of webinars on border huts and related subjects. So we'll keep doing this kind of webinars to take forward our agenda for change and a positive change. So with that, let me wish you, all of you and your family, a very happy, safe Diwali. I'm sure that you see, there is a Chinese proverb which reads like this: it is better to light a candle than curse this darkness. So this is a very general thing. Of course, we always light a candle to curse darkness. And for this particular darkness, we'll definitely light candles during this Diwali. So thank you very much. Wish you a very safe and happy Diwali to all of you.
Thank you. Thank you, Bipul. Take care and happy Diwali.
Thank you, and Diwali greetings to everyone.
Sri Radha, goodbye. Bhalo theken.
Thank you.
Happy
Okay.
Diwali to everyone.
Happy Diwali, Pritam. Happy Diwali.
Thank you.
সবাই ভালো
Dr.
থাকেন, সুস্থ থাকেন।
All the
সামাজিক
best.
অসামাজিক সব দূরত্ব মেনে চলেন।
Thank you.
Okay.
দেখা হবে।
দেখা হবে।
দেখা হবে।
আসসালামু আলাইকুম।
করোনা রাক্ষসীকে তাড়াতাড়ি বিদায় জানাই।
হ্যাঁ।
Okay.
Bye, Sriradha. Bye,
Bye, bye, bye.
Bye.